All right, welcome everybody to our November Make It Matter Monday. Tomorrow is election day. I know, fingers crossed. We're celebrating. It is a scary time for those of us who are committed and invested in a particular outcome. But honestly, just the fact that our democracy is waking up from a deep slumber. Y'all, I've been at this for 30 years. I was an activist at the University of North Carolina back in the 80s when no one cared. And we graduated from college not caring, and we carried our way through the work and family world not caring. And we are finally waking up as a society. And so, of course, we're hoping and invested in some progress to move us out of where we are. But at the end of the day, just the fact that people are voting, just the fact that we get so many people showing up to these meetings, and not just this meeting, every meeting, people are turning out. And that to me is incredibly exciting. And that is why I want to celebrate our democracy. And because Jolisa's here, I have to do this again. This is the swag bag that I got from Jolisa and Raise Your Hand Texas. And I've been sharing it with the neighborhood. And unfortunately, I have a lot of pictures of the swag with naked children, which I can't post. So I'm sorry. It turns out the swag bags get opened right after bath time. And the people keep sending me these photos that I cannot possibly post anywhere and not get arrested for. So we're still working on, family-friendly, social media appropriate images with our Raise Your Hand Texas swag. But thank you to everybody who has participated and advocates like Jolisa who pulled people out. Like, this is it, you guys. This is what we're doing. Is people like you and me, and we're going to hear these stories, are changing the world. The voter turnout is going to change the world. Maybe not this time, hopefully this time, maybe not this time, but eventually engaged families, engaged children, engaged parents. That is the goal. So I am going to kick this off. I know Tanya Tasneem is a middle school teacher, and I'm going to let her tell her story about how she became an advocate. People get their Kleenex out if you need Kleenex. I've got some to share because some of these stories are really hard. But I want everybody to be respectful and be aware that this is a journey for all of us. And this is just the first step. We're going to start by us telling our stories about advocacy, and then we're going to scatter as a group and as a community and encourage people to tell their personal stories to our elected representatives like Artie, who is here on the call with us, because they want to do right by us. They want to know what we're experiencing, and we get to tell them. That's our job. So I am turning it over to Tanya. Tanya, I'm going to figure out how to make you, okay, you're my spotlight. Tanya, tell us your story, my friend.
Oh man, where do I start? Do I just tell them the same thing that we talked about?
Yeah, you just start at the beginning. How'd you get
I
here?
mean, the story is behind me, actually. Those are all my yearbook photos from Keeling. I just I learned about ACPTA through AIC Collaborates, and so this is my 15th year at Keeling Middle School, and I just I'm a product of El Paso ISD, and I went through public schools. My family immigrated here from Pakistan, and I feel like against all odds. um, I'm a success story from public education, and I love being an educator. I think it's just always been part of who I was supposed to be, and it is my calling. I'm still doing it now, and um, I just started listening to that book, Daphne, that you told me about, Slaying Goliath, and so like I've been in the thick of the just all the things in education for the past 10 years, right? Like this battle of like charter schools. I work in a magnet program, like is like charter schools, vouchers, like standardized testing, like all of the new technological fads, like let's go one to one. Like we were one to one before COVID, and then COVID happened. Now everybody's one to one, right? And now there's like issues about Like, what does that look like as far as learning? And I just feel like my journey as an educator has, like, the purpose has always been that I strongly believe in education as a vehicle for social justice. But lately, I'm seeing how decisions and policies are put into place to keep education in its place almost. Like, we're a lot of these things are complicit in the fact that we're covering up the root of the problem, which is that education is one of the cogs in systemic racism in this country. And it's been such a, just like, back and forth in my own brain about how complicit I am, just because I continue to want to be an educator for this, like, system that is kind of designed this way, even though that's not how I personally feel about it. And so I started to really think about, okay, like, you know, I want to give my students and my colleagues and my school and my admin like 1000%, especially in this year. But so many things are happening that are outside of our control. Like, where do I have a voice? I didn't have a voice in the reopening phase one. I have a voice now because I advocated for myself, and I, you know, emailed Dr. Elizalde's secretary and said I want to be on that focus group. And now I feel like I want to have a bigger voice than that. Like, how do I advocate for the way that we're, like, interpreting TEA guidelines, and also, like, what is happening policy wise that, you know, since I've been a teacher, I've been taught actually to, like, look down at my students and teach who's in front of me. And now things are happening out there that are directly impacting me and the students who I'm looking at right now. So I just am trying to figure out how to advocate in the teacher focus group. I'm, you know, a member of the leadership team on my campus, and I'm just loud and proud in the Pakistani El Pasoan. So, like, I'm not going to be quiet anymore. Like, change is coming, and it's got to come from us. So I don't know. I feel like that's my story. And also, I'm a UTeach alum, and that whole motto is, you know, we prepare teachers and they change the world. And that's what I'm trying to do every day, one kid at a time.
Thank you very much, Tanya. We love this story. I personally love seeing immigrants who are success stories, because that's not the way it's portrayed, and yet I see it all around me every single day. So thank you, and thank you for your service to our children. I love hearing the heart of our teachers. I'm always impressed by teachers. So Artie, I see you here. Are you up for being our next speaker, my friend?
I am. How are you guys doing? It's so nice to see everyone. Tanya, thank you so much for sharing your story. I love that there's another South Asian educator here. That's like, this is probably like,
I know, right? It never even occurs to me. And then I'm like, oh, right.
So my parents came here from India, and so did my husband. So we definitely have lived the experience as well. But I think for, you know, in terms of advocacy, how I started, I think we all have our own kind of story. So Daphne, thank you so much for giving the opportunity for me to reflect on this a little bit. I think it all, I mean, there's so many moments. I think one was for me when I was teaching. I started my career as a teacher. I taught in Donna ISD, which is down in the valley, and it happened. So, you know, classroom management was a huge challenge for a first-year teacher, and I taught fourth grade, and I learned at an in-service this method of dealing with conflict resolution in the classroom. And instead of punishing kids and yelling at them or whatever it was at that time, you know, to get them to be quiet, you know, giving them points or whatever it was, they said, you know, there's actually a script you can follow, and you can have, you know, let's say there's two kids who are like arguing with each other and they're being disruptive. You just take them both outside the classroom. And first you take one student actually, and you talk to them about what happened. Okay, and let that child speak. Okay, then you send that kid back, and then you bring the other one out and you say, okay, now you tell me, what happened? Like, what's your version of the story? Okay. Usually, I mean, sometimes they were similar, sometimes they were very different. And then I would say, okay, now both of you kind of tell me what you just told me, but to each other. Okay. And so they do it. And you eventually go through this process where you leave the two people alone, the two kids alone, to sort out their own problems. And I would just go back in the classroom. They'd be in the hallway. And by the time I came back a couple of minutes later, they were joking around and having fun. To me, like, that's advocacy. That is putting power in the hands of the people you are serving and allowing them to figure out what is best for them and give them the support and tools and the belief in them to do that. And that revolutionized my classroom. It truly did. I can't even tell you. I don't even remember what training I got that at, but I'm so grateful for whoever told me that, because it allowed me to teach in new ways, because it created this atmosphere of respect in the classroom. And kids weren't used to that. They were just used to being told what to do. And so that was like a sort of a formative experience for me. And it just kind of grew through my professional experiences, not only as a teacher, but I do evaluation work with universities on education programs, a lot of STEM, innovative kind of researchy education programs. And then I brought that to PTA as well. I was the PTA president at Oak Hill Elementary, which is in Southwest Austin. It was a Title I school at the time. And, you know, when they asked me to step up into that role, I said, okay, I'll do it. But my whole agenda here is to kind of replicate what I did with my own kids in my classroom, which was to bring up the voices to help create a supportive environment that would make everyone in our school feel comfortable. Because it's a wonderful school, and it always has been. But it was segregated. Like, our PTA did not really represent the Spanish-speaking families in our school. We're about 40% English language learners. And I was like, you know, that's not right. Like, we've got to figure out a way to serve them and allow them to feel like they're part of this community, which they are. And so I just, and they're like, okay, fine, sure. We just need a PTA president, for God's sake. Like, we'll do anything. And so we just started by I started by just talking with the bilingual teachers at my school. I had an after school meeting with them, and I told them kind of what I was hoping to do, and did they know any parents that were kind of leaders in the community, in our school community, and that they could connect me with. And they did. They connected me with Cecilia Montoya. Some of you might know her. But she and I became friends. My Spanish is very mediocre. And her English was actually not bad. Her English was better than my Spanish, but we communicated. We met with others, like some of her friends, and just started talking about, like, what would they like to see in our school. And I would have come up with something like, you know, really nerdy, like a Spanish, you know, science night or something like that. Spanish language science experiments or something. They're like, that's fine, Arthi, but what we really want to do is start a ballet folklorico at our campus. And I was like, that's way better of an idea. And, you know, and so that's what we did. We launched this ballet folklorico. And so we had all these kids sign up. We had our office staff, like, volunteer her time to be their teacher. And we got costumes donated, and it became this big, huge thing at our school, where it brought so many parents in to the school where they felt valued and honored. And that morphed into creating an executive position on our PTA board, a cultural outreach chair who was somebody who was bilingual, bicultural, and could kind of be that bridge with the community. And we started a Spanish-speaking parents group, you know, once a month. And my friend Marcela was in charge of that. And so it was just like one thing after another. And so to me, that's advocacy in a nutshell. Because I think, like, that's kind of the advocacy that anyone can do, is just by creating relationships. There's, of course, the formal advocacy that we always think about with the legislature and all of that. And I do that too. And it's very similar, like you hear Daphne doing all that. Yes. And that is so important. We've all got to play a role, but it also starts with just getting everyday people to realize that they have a voice, and then just kind of helping them feel comfortable and creating an environment where everyone feels welcome to share it. And so that's what I try to do now on the board of trustees. You know, we had such a success with our PTA and that model, and it got us some attention and really helped me to kind of get a bigger picture view of what's happening in Austin ISD, and getting involved as the legislative chair, the advocacy chair. Before Daphne, before Sonia, it was me, and just kind of working with the district folks, and Julie Cowan, who is a former trustee who is really amazing at all this legislative advocacy stuff, and so she showed me the ropes, and then I try to, like, you know, do what I do, organize people and inform them, and now we have this today. So that's kind of my story, and I'm just really honored to have had the opportunities to, you know, to do what I've done. So there you go.
Thank you, Arthi. I appreciate that so much. And Arthi is an example of someone who was a parent who literally has taken it to the school board. And that's one of the things that is incredibly powerful about getting involved. It's really about showing up. And, you can show up in a letter or in an email. You can show up to events like this, or to protests, or to, do public testimony at board meetings. You can show up to run for office. And I mean, that's like the ultimate showing up, is when you're literally Arthi's not getting paid for this. Are you? I don't think so, right? You guys, this is a volunteer position. And, as somebody who interacts with the policymakers and the school board representatives, there's a lot of power there. There's a lot of power there. And so what we want is people on the school board who are wielding that power, who come from a place where they've been active in their community, and they've been, participating in the schools, and then through their voice in various layers of policymaking, because we do have people in our representative community who do not have classroom experience, who are representing schools, who have never been in a school. And so, be aware of that there's a lot of power that comes from just showing up, but we get to choose the representatives who are showing up because they have walked the walk and spent their time going through this journey. So it's important to me. That's why I love Arthi. But actually, all of our school board, our school board's pretty good, and certainly our candidates have been walking the walk. It'll be really interesting to see what the next school board looks like, and what kind of, everybody's always trying to improve. Everybody gets into office because they want to improve on where we are now, and I think we have some big opportunities, and hopefully Arthi's excited about that as well.
I'm super excited. And, one thing, like, we talk about equity so much in our school board and in our district. And I think that, like, Dr. Stephanie Hawley has a really amazing example of what the equity by design process is. And I think when you're thinking about advocacy, equity just goes hand in hand. You can't have advocacy without equity, and you can't have equity without advocacy. So I just love that our district is moving in this direction where we are amplifying, the importance of equity, because that really is advocacy. One big piece of our equity approach in the district is making sure that marginalized people's voices are heard and they're part of the design process. And so I just am thrilled about that. I'm thrilled that we have reopened our general comments, by the way. We have a board info session tonight. So you still have some time. If you have a comment, it can be about anything in the district. It doesn't just have to be on an agenda item. And so do that. But I think we're moving in the right direction. I just echoing Daphne is, I'm super excited about what I'm hearing from the candidates, and should be interesting to see what happens tomorrow.
Wait. All right, I had to end it with that exciting celebration of democracy. Thank you, Arthi. I think the other two people that we had lined up have also had very rough days. So I'm going to call on a couple people and put you on the spot. Lisa, I want you to tell your story, my friend.
Sure. So my name is Lisa Flores. I have 2 kids in AISD. I am a trained disability advocate, and my first training was out of necessity, School of Hard Knocks. My oldest son was enrolled in a local, I won't go into the name, but a local charter school that was not really respecting his right to education. And I had to quickly learn laws and procedures. I learned pretty quickly that the buck stopped with me. And if I didn't learn those laws and procedures, that my son was not going to get what he needed. So my story, like so many other advocates, probably was born out of necessity more than luxury. And honestly, this is if you would have told me, you know, years ago that I would be a disability advocate, I would have laughed at you. I initially was very uncomfortable with having a child with a disability. I was very uncomfortable with what that meant. But, you know, I did a 180 and have learned a lot and done a lot of work on self-improvement. So my first step of advocacy is, once I kind of learned those laws and procedures, was to share it with other parents at the school who I knew that their children were not getting what they needed. So meeting up in coffee shops, helping them, give them a game plan for their next meeting to ask for supports and services. And ironically, all the people I helped, their kids would get everything asked for except for mine. So my advocacy started with sharing. Even though I wasn't an expert, I was very compelled to share what I knew with others so that kids would get what they needed. I'm always focused on helping kids. So my advocacy grew really after the 14-year illegal cap on special education in Texas. You know, for those who don't know, there was a 14-year long illegal cap on special education. Only 8.5% of our population was allowed to get services. And, you know, it was devastating. An entire population of kids, 14 years, there's an entire generation of kids, K through 12, who did not have their needs met. And it had really far-reaching consequences. And I was at a point in my advocacy where I really longed to be part of a tribe, and I really longed to do something with my passion and my advocacy. And for me, that was the night where the Department of Education and the TEA had a listening session in Austin about the illegal cap. And I remember speaking that night, and I had this whole thing prepared, and others had said it. So I kind of went off the cuff and gave a speech. And I remember people were yelling out things like "preach" and, you know, "say it," and like clapping and cheering. And I remember feeling an overwhelming wave, like, these are my people, like, this is it. This is where I wanted to be. This is my tribe. This is where I belong. And I got lots of business cards, like, down the aisle to me to reach out to them. So for me, it was just I was so grateful that, like, my heart's desire came true, that I had found like-minded people and found an avenue for my advocacy. It's kind of cheesy, but it's the truth. I have a very simple motto: to advocate at any and every opportunity. So that can be a one-on-one conversation with someone. That can be a social media post. That can be going big and, you know, going to the legislature. Advocacy doesn't have a limit, and there's no set way to do it. Any way that you need to do it is the right way. And that can be within your own family. That can be at your church. That can be, like, any wave that you want to produce has to start with, you know, a pebble. So I think a lot of people get tied up, or I got tied up. Let me make an I statement. I got tied up in, like, not being an expert or not knowing enough and not being qualified to do certain things. And that certainly was present for me, not last legislative session, but the session prior. I'm from West Texas. I'm from El Paso. You know, it's a 10-hour car drive from here. And I'm very cognitive that I have the privilege to live 15 minutes away from our state capital. And I take that privilege seriously, that I can just get in my car and go to the Capitol and be heard. Many people in our state cannot do that. It is a privilege, and I felt beholden to show up to take part in the process. So not last session, the session before, I remember climbing the steps to the Capitol, and we all have those like doubting inner dialogues, and I was thinking, I'm a nobody, I'm just a mom, who cares what I think? And it was just running over. I was like psyching myself up as I was walking up the stairs, because it was the first time I had ever planned to give testimony. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what the hearings were like. So I powered through those really awful self-doubting skills to go to the hearing room and give testimony for the first time. And I sat for 12 hours to give my testimony. So it was enough time to calm down and learn how things were. It's not always like that. So don't be discouraged, for those of you out there. It's not always a 12-hour wait. But, it gave me a couple of skills to listen to what was not being said in the room. This particular hearing was about school vouchers. So I gave a very particular perspective, as that, and I just kept showing up and made friends in the advocacy community, and now I am employed as an advocacy specialist. I'm also a graduate. I applied for a program called Texas Partners in Policymaking, which is an 8-month-long advocacy program that focuses on disability policy. And to Arthy's point, really advocacy is about relationships. It is my personal policy to build relationships with people. Not everybody that I know is an expert on disability, nor do I expect them to be. I do try to forge relationships with others to hopefully establish myself as a good source of information, a reasonable source of information, a safe place to ask questions. And I've tried to forge relationships both in our school district and with legislative offices and with other advocates. And maybe it's just in my extrovert nature, but I've managed to sort of get in there, because there are not a lot of experts about disability that live it every day. As the parent of somebody with a disability, I cannot claim my son's experience, but I certainly have enough close relationship with him, and we share enough that I understand some of the barriers. I can never presume to speak for him as a person with a disability, but I certainly can take those experiences and try and go to bat to make things better for people like my son. So really, and I also support, I'm bilingual and bicultural. I support many other people in giving them trainings to understand advocacy. And part of the trainings that I give really focuses on you don't have to go, there's no set way to be an advocate, even if you want to just do it in your own family, So it's important for people to be heard. I think it was Arthy that said that, empowering people to be part of the processes, to be heard, to not have that running dialogue like I did, that you're a nobody, that it doesn't matter. It does matter. Your expertise is valuable. Every person's expertise is valuable, and there's room for all of us. So yeah, hopefully I didn't meander too much through this. I hadn't planned on speaking, so thank you for the opportunity to share. My goal, mostly in my work with AISD, I do a lot of volunteer work. I'm on a lot of committees. Really, just that it's my commitment to advocate at any and every opportunity. So I try to lend a perspective to make sure that people with disabilities and our students with disabilities are always considered under items of equity, because frequently we're so hyper-focused on race and other issues that disability is not specifically considered. So I persistently peck away to hopefully get those considerations included every opportunity I can, because they overlap with race. There's intersectionality there. So that's what I try to do. Thank you for the opportunity to share.
Lisa is awesome. We are gonna, by the time I'm done with Lisa, she is never gonna apologize for her Lisa-ness again. We adore everything about you. You never have to apologize, my friend. Thank you for your story.
I feel like that's an El Paso thing, because I do that a lot too. sorry.
I know her.
Thank you, because it's true. I mean, we do forget that Texas was under investigation, under federal investigation over the caps on special ed. And that is, we shouldn't accept that. We should never have accepted that for 14 years. So I love all of it, and you're absolutely right. I mean, it is about relationships. I personally take great pride in the fact that I've converted people to public education at the AT&T store, at HEB in the vegetable, section, at farmers markets. I have had people who have moved into our neighborhood who were fully intending to go to public school or to private school or a charter school because we didn't have an A-rated school according to our standardized test, because we have an amazingly diverse and amazing population. And it's an amazing school anyway. And I personally have converted 3 or 4 just neighbors to public education. And so Lisa is right. It's about your passion. It's about your investment in the knowledge. I mean, I'm shocked at how much I know now and how much I still don't know. For a while, I thought I knew it all, right? And then the more I got to know, the more I realized, yeah, wow, there's this whole wide world of stuff that I don't know. And that's been one of the true gifts of this role for me, is getting to know people like Lisa. And unfortunately, the Zoom is not working right. The Facebook's not working right. We have other speakers who want to get on, and we can't figure out how to get them into the Zoom meeting. So I apologize to everybody out there. Technology is not our friend today. But we're just going to keep moving forward. And I'm sorry to
I'm sorry. What is there something I can do to help if we just do a quick moment? Is there just people who need Zoom links, or just
look
not?
on Facebook. Jolisa was saying that Matthew, I'm drawing a blank. Yeah, Matthew, who is one of our speakers.
Okay, let me see if I can work with him while you continue.
Okay, I sure will. And Lisa made the point that TEA is still under investigation. So I'm always kind of focused on the big picture. Let's change this whole world. But the fact is, changing one person at a time is far more effective. So I'm gonna, I have a story to tell too, but I am not the most interesting person here. Melissa, I'm calling on you. I want to hear your story, my friend. Thank you so much, Lisa.
Hi, y'all.
Sorry, before you go, I just wanted to say bye and thank you for giving me the time to share. I just have to transition for my last class, so
We
I'll
understand.
see you guys next Monday, maybe, or the next time.
Yeah, thank you, teacher. We appreciate everything you do. Go take care of our babies. All right, Melissa.
Hey, y'all. I feel like I've said so much so many other times, and I really signed on today to spend some time with you wonderful people to make me feel better about humanity right now. So maybe we're all having a tough day.
Yeah.
So just I appreciate everything that y'all do, and I feel like sometimes I get more credit. I feel often that I get more credit than I deserve, because I find just doing something little is so easy, and I don't understand why more people don't do that. And I try to share that message with people. It's really easy to do something. You don't have to jump in, give up on your whole life, and do everything. Just find the little thing that matters to you, that you care about. And I find that when you become a part of these groups, there's things that I hate doing, and there's always someone that they love doing that, and they don't understand why I like the thing that I like to do. So similar to, I think Lisa had said it, I used to live in South Florida, so we were very, very, very far away from Tallahassee, where the capital was. So when I got upset at some things that were happening in public education in the state of Florida, I felt at that time my option, and I had the option, was to remove my child from public education and, and vote and speak to people about voting. But there was no way to get to Tallahassee at the time in my life to do any of that. And for what life was what it was at the time. And so even our local offices where our state leaders had a presence, that just was out of my view at the time. So then when I moved to Austin, and same thing, 15 minutes from the Capitol building, and I felt that obligation for the people that don't live here in Austin, and it's not easy to get to. And so I definitely felt that same obligation to be a voice for those who can't get here. And something that I learned quickly, that because you walk into that beautiful building, and it can feel very intimidating. But I had an experience when I was in my early 20s working, and I had this epiphany that people are people, and it's just people in whatever amazing role that they may be in at that point. And someone older than me, I had something happen, and she complimented how I handled that for someone as young as I was at the time. And I realized, like, oh, this is not a scary, larger than life person. This is just another human doing what she does, and recognizing that I'm doing what I'm doing as a human. So I like to take people down to the Capitol when we have these big rally days and things like that. And one of the things that I say to them is, this is your building. These are your offices. The people in them right now work for you, and to try to get that mindset instead of everyone. And I still sometimes shiver, and my voice will quiver before I start to speak, or if I'm doing testimony or something. I mean, it's just kind of intimidating. But the reality is those people work for me. They've been put in those positions to listen to what we have to say. They don't always listen to it, but they need to hear it. I need to say it. It needs to be said. And I think that we do see some positive movement, and that we continue to do that. I think some of us are surrounded and constantly hearing negativity from people and just opposition on a constant basis. I think it's really healthy to be a member of these groups, to be reminded that there are good people in this world doing good things. And I just I miss being with y'all, because I think it's just been really hard doing this. And while I know we're all doing it together, we're doing it apart together, and I think we're all missing that. And one of my draws for being an advocacy is definitely being, because I can right now, and I know so many people that can't, and they need it. And I think that's really important. I also have, I got involved with PTA when my youngest, my son, I think it was when my youngest was in high school, is when I first started, and I got dragged on by a pushy friend who was going to be PTA president at our PTSA president at my child's high school, and she's just impossible to say no to. But it was really eye-opening to find out. I think one day she said one summer she was going down to the school to meet a parent, because they were working on the sprinkler system at the school. And I was like, thinking that parent, how coincidental, that parent's whatever business has a contract with the school. And they're like, no, the district can't pay for this. It's just volunteer. I'm like, we have a volunteer to maintain the sprinkler system at the school. I was like, and then I started finding out all of the things that I assumed that the district paid for that they don't, including textbooks for required classes, like government. It's a required graduation class, and the books were being provided by I think money that was donated. We didn't have enough money in the district for the class to even have a classroom set of books. And this was what was considered one of the wealthier high schools in Austin. So it was just very eye-opening to get involved in that way. I haven't had, my youngest graduated 2.5 years ago. I'm still involved and I tell people constantly, it doesn't matter whether you have a child in public education, your accountant, the person at the HEB that you're working with, your doctor, your postman, chances are people that you're dealing with on a daily basis have been public education educated. And so we need to care about this. And so it just will never be unimportant. And as long as I can do something, I'm just gonna sit in there and do something and drag as many people into it as I can along the way. And there's just something everyone can contribute. It doesn't have to be huge, but all those little pieces add up.
Thank you, Melissa. You're absolutely right. All those little pieces add up. And you're absolutely right about the community too. because what you find is when you get involved in this, you suddenly realize it's really not about your kid. Whatever problem your kid might be having that got you in it in the first place, your kid is one of millions of kids in our country who are going through the same thing. And being around people who are working hard for others, man, that's just, I was in the corporate world for a long time, and you can go for years without being in a meeting where everybody's thinking about someone else and, speaking and helping someone else. And to me, that's one of the gifts of public education. We are the community. We are our country. We are the people who make up Austin, Texas, right? And you were talking about, seeing the post office and stuff. I go to the grocery store, I drive in traffic, and I think, oh, teachers, we need to work on, how our children interact with the rest of the world. Social emotional learning is an imperative because we let it go for far too long. When you see it in traffic, you see it sometimes when you're at the grocery store. And that is the stuff that affects our lives for every single moment of every day. And that is the promise of public education. So thank you so much, Melissa. I agree with you. The community I'm here for the community too, for our babies and the people who fight for them. I am going to now call on Matthew. Matthew, I am so sorry that you struggled getting into this meeting, but welcome. And we're grateful you finally made it through the technology fog that I created.
It's all good. These things happen. It's like 'tis the season, right? Or these few months of trying to deal with technology and all our Zoom meetings. But so thanks for having me today. I'm fairly new to the Austin Council PTA. I am the Council PTA rep for Bear Creek Elementary, which is a new school here in Austin. So pretty cool opportunity to create a whole new PTA culture and a new school culture. And I'm personally pretty excited because I get to learn more about what Council PTA is doing and then kind of that relationship between local and Council PTAs. And, PTA has kind of been in my blood since I was little. My mom, was vice president and Ways and Means chair and secretary and was president at the local level and council a couple times and the district or area level. And I think the second time she was Council PTA president, I was in college. So she was in PTA well beyond me. But I think my fondest memories were at the elementary level. Just her volunteering, at the school fair. I remember she was at the prize table and the ice cream social. And even those little times at the teacher workroom where you see mom in the hallway, I think she just really fosters this attitude of service towards education and a love of education for me. So Bear Creek is the third PTA I've been involved with. I've been in two other PTAs and they both had kind of different cultures. So the first one was kind of small. The teachers and administration did a lot of the programming. It was a small group of parents that were doing the fundraising and volunteering, but it kind of made this really close-knit group of parents and teachers working well together. And something that's really cool that happens in our district is Pride Week for the LGBTQ families and youth. And the school really stepped up and did some really cool activities, every family did a coat of arms celebrating their family and what was important to them, and those were hung in the hallway. And they also did what they call a pride parade. So every grade got a color, and the parents, they did the parade through the school and came out to the pavilion, and the parents are out there saying, you're awesome, you rock. And so not only is it a good kind of community builder for the school, but also the grade level. And then at the end, I think last year they had a drone that took a picture of everybody. So they get to see not only are you one with your grade level, but here's the rainbow of our school. And so I'm a big fan of the Pride Week. Just kind of, I think at the elementary level, it does a really good job of celebrating family diversity, which could be same-sex couples or different sex couples, but also different family structures, families that have just one parent, or single parent families, divorced families, maybe families that are blended or have, different structures, let's say you have multiple generations living in the same house. But then also kind of even if your family structure is different, having pride in your family. And then, but kind of at the middle school and high school, I think it shifts a little bit to when I'm saying like identity, like who am I? What makes me me? Why do I like the things I like? Some of the anti-bullying stuff, healthy relationships, like who's a safe adult? What makes a good friend, right? So it's some really great, not programs, not the right word, but kind of bettering yourself as an individual, right? And as a community member. Then we switched schools to one that was really big. The PTA is really big. You know, parents have all the time and money to be highly involved. It's well established, lots of programming. And when Pride Week was coming along, I was like, okay, I can't wait to see what's gonna shake out here. But Pride Week kind of came and went. I didn't see anything, didn't hear anything. I heard like rumors that just different attitudes concerning LGBTQ issues. And I have to admit, like I kind of came in hot, right? I was on social media. I went and talked to the Campus Advisory Council. And then I had to kind of take a hot minute and say, like, Matt, why don't you just back up a little bit, take a little break and kind of see what the school culture is like. So I just became like a room parent, would read to the class, but I also started asking questions, right? So I'm going to my Campus Advisory Council. I'm going to the SHAC meetings, community engagement meetings, started going to school board meetings, also reaching out to other community groups saying like, am I crazy or am I the only one that this is experiencing this or having these questions? So I found the group Informed Parents of Austin. And after about half a year to a year of sitting in these meetings and listening to people, I started to get these kind of bigger ideas, right? So specifically in the board meetings, like I'm coming in with my passion, but I'm staying to listen to what others are saying, right? So not only is it what I care about, I hear what other people care about, and I'm listening to the school board, right? And with the issues they're dealing with, budget, I think renaming was going on, equity, health services, community partners, how they interact with the state government, operations and facilities. So now I kind of have a better understanding of like, how do these pieces of the puzzle kind of affect my passion, right? But I'm also like, I think like the optometrist, right? Like you put on your lens and now I can kind of see like, oh, those bigger things are happening. And from my point of view, how can I make those things better? And as I've been learning more about the Council PTA, I think the ACPTA's advocacy efforts do kind of line up with the LGBTQ advocacy efforts in the sense that I think every child needs to be seen and valued, right? And then every family is welcome. So with families, I don't want to teach anyone values, right? But like, let's acknowledge what exists. So when my husband and I are walking our kids to school, like we're two dads walking our kids to school, we exist. Right? When my son refers to me as Daddy Matt versus Dad, like there might be questions like, well, I call my dad Dad. Why do you say Daddy Matt? Right? So let's talk about what's different and why. Right? And then when you zoom out, that this affects other things in our schools. Right? Families that bring their cultures to our schools and our classrooms, their traditions, even different ways of learning. Right? Let's talk about what's different and why. And then we can have those conversations at home if you want to have conversations around values and things like that. But then specifically about youth, I think, as you were mentioning before, social emotional learning is so important. And I'm going to kind of highlight mental health because I think with conversations I have, some people will say to me like, well, LGBTQ youth, you know, they have higher rates of suicide, right? So if we're going to talk more about LGBTQ issues or even name it, there's going to be more kids that are gay, and then we're going to have increased suicides, right? But then I had to like go back and be like, well, I'm not sure if you took like a stats class because correlation, right, doesn't imply causation. So there's usually some other factor going on. And what they miss is the subtext that like no matter what I'm trying to say. I think for a couple decades, we've had this said explicitly or implicitly that it doesn't matter how good you are, right? How kind you are to other people, what you achieve. If you're gay, you're bad, or even worse, that you're evil, and that there is like no chance of redemption, right? So if you're a teenager, you're trying to figure out who you are, you're trying to push against your parents' rules, your peers are really important, what other people think about you is important. Sometimes you think the world's against you. If you're getting that messaging that, oh, you're not worthy of redemption, that's why that exists, right? But we can also apply that to other things like how we talk to our kids, right? Your kid gets a bad grade and you say, the teacher's stupid, right? That really shades everything, that perception, your kid's perception of your teacher, and can kind of exacerbate the problem, right? To like bad attitude or bad going, getting even worse. Or like even at the lunch table when let's say that there's a kid that is vegetarian, right? And your kid eats meat. And then they're thinking like, well, that kid doesn't eat meat, but I do. Well, I can't be wrong because what I do is okay. They must be wrong. Different's wrong. So we just kind of keeping that in mind, that these ideas are LGBTQ ideas, but also bigger. And it's something I struggle with too. I kind of call it the dishwasher bias. That like when I got married, like there's the way that I organized the dishwasher, which was clearly right, and the way that my husband organized the dishwasher which was clearly wrong, right? And early on in our marriage, I was like, I'll be the bigger person. I'll let him be wrong, and he'll see that I'm right. And it didn't change. So then I passive aggressively would change things, right? So he could see that he was wrong and my way was better. And then finally, it blows up. I'm like, why do you put the silverware upside down? Like you have the handles out, and when I'm putting it away, like the fork should be in one place and the spoon should be in one place. And he's like, I just kind of put it up because I think the forks and spoons get washed better if they're pointed up. And I don't like putting the spoons in the same one because they spoon each other and they may not get washed. And I'm like, okay, I can see how that would work, right? But my way works too, right? And we come to some kind of the compromise, right? Either we become more entrenched in what we believe, or we can take a little bit of that and make it part of us. So I think there's a lot of big things we can do, right? We can change legislation. We can begin to tackle big ideas. I think right now the idea of equity it's one that we're going to have to chip away at or digest. But there's also small things we can do. I know with my LGBTQ, obviously, pride stickers, something so small, it can mean the world. Halfway through the year last year, I went into the front office and one of the staff had put up a sticker. And I sent her an email just saying, thank you. Like it maybe took you 5 seconds to put that on, but as a teenager, it was hard for me to imagine walking into a school and feeling, not even seen, but like, oh, thank goodness, this is not going to be an uphill battle every time I come in here and want to do something. Or even with the virtual learning that's been going on, in the background of my kids' teacher's class, like she has a filing cabinet and I saw a pride sticker back there. And it's like, she may not know everything, but I can believe that she's going to try her best, right? So I'm kind of excited for get to know the council PTA a little bit better and your advocacy efforts. I think it's an exciting time because I feel like we're all a little bit more politically engaged. It's exciting. It's a legislative session, and something that really actually gives me hope is that I've heard people in PTA on both sides of the aisle kind of say that education isn't partisan. So hopefully there's one thing that we can come together on for our kids, right? I'm also excited kind of for council and state PTA just to learn more about Texas Education Agency and the State Board of Education, because something I've been thinking about this year is, with responsibility comes accountability. So you're in charge, that's great, but you're gonna have to be able to answer why you're doing the things that you do. And also just sitting on this meeting, just kind of learning from other people what their passions are and what's going on in other schools. So I'm excited to be part of the council PTA. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Matthew. I'm so glad you were able to come in. And I do feel like it's, I was telling Matthew this earlier this week, I feel like it's one of those areas that I just have not been paying enough attention to. It doesn't mean that I don't care, but it is one of the, it was to me another reminder that I need to be aware of who's not in the room when we're having these conversations. I've started thinking more about our Black communities represented, our brown communities represented. represented. But when we talk about diversity, it really is all of us. Like, is everybody being represented? And so I so appreciate Matthew reached out to us, and I feel like we've got a strong partnership ahead of us, because this is equity. This is treating every human being with the dignity that I expect to be treated with as a white woman, a straight white woman of privilege. I expect every day to be treated in a certain way, and I lose my mind if I'm not treated that way. And it's become obvious to me that I, at some point, needed to lose my mind for other people not being treated that way. And so that's what I've been doing the last 6 years, rattling cages, saying, this is a bigger world than the one that I represent and the one that I've been fully immersed in for my entire life. And public education is what got me out of my white bubble. Public education, having my child, it feels a lot more some days. but and this is one of those days, y'all. It was public education that the only reason I have Black friends, that I have Black people who come to my house for Christmas, is because of public education. That was never happening in the corporate world. The only reason why I have, a bigger view now is because we got into this amazingly diverse school and met these amazing human beings that honestly, as a white woman, I've never even thought about. They were just not part of my world. And that is such a shame. And knowing now from firsthand experience that it is entirely possible to go through your entire life without ever thinking about people outside of your bubble. And I think that is happening a lot in our country and in our society. And so I'm a huge public education super fan, because it did push me out of my bubble. And it did make me realize that people like me have a responsibility to fight for everyone, not just my own kid. So thank you very much, Matthew, for bringing your perspective and your energy, and I love it. I am going to, is there anyone else who wants to raise their hand? There's a few more people I'd love to call on. Anyone? Well, I'm going to quickly tell my story then, if you guys will indulge me. And it's a long story. I was in the corporate world. I was single and happy, loved it, never had any intention of getting married or of having children. And in fact, spent my entire adult life stiff-arming men who dared to think that they could change my mind on either one of those points. And I was perfectly happy. I had a great life, traveled the world, made money, great life. And then I met this amazing guy and thought, okay, maybe I should get married. And so we did, and that was awesome. And then he was so amazing with kids. I thought, I'm 42, I'm fat, I'm old. I can say, let's try to get pregnant, and it'll never happen. I will be off the hook for the rest of my life. 3 months later, we got the big news. And so I was like, all right, the energy that I put into my life, I am now going to be forced to put into somebody else's. And, not everybody's a natural mom. I have to say, he's grown on me. But it was a shock to my system to become a parent. And, but then he was this delightful, amazing human creature. And we had such a great time. So and my mom also started her health was going downhill. And so it was not really feasible for me to take care of her and him and have a job. I tried for 3 months, the worst 3 months of my life. And so I stayed home and took care of her and took care of him. And he was so delightful and such an amazing addition to my life that I couldn't bring myself to put him into preschool. I liked hanging out with him, so he just kind of hung out with me. So honest to goodness, the first time we were around a lot of kids, we had neighborhood friends, and of course, my friends had kids, but I was 49 years old and walked into an elementary school for the first time since 1978. And like, on the one hand, nothing changed, right? Like, I'm walking into these, sanitary, old, I mean, sanitary is not the right word, but not, you know, not welcoming necessarily. I mean, these brick buildings with funky old air conditioning units. And it was a shock to me that, you know, we hadn't updated the architecture of schools since the 1970s. And I've learned since that there is updated architecture, but that was not my first exposure. You know, one of our first PTA meetings, the year before, they'd had purple t-shirts. And the PTA meeting, they're talking about how we have to have black t-shirts because the boys didn't like purple. And I'm like, it's what? It's 2014. I thought we accepted gays by now. I thought that we were okay with colors, you know, like the colors didn't define us. I thought that we would have expanded our knowledge of all of this stuff. And here I was stuck in this Texas public school with, and I always joked, I mean, I've always had gay friends. I have huge respect for anybody in our society who came out before 10 or 15 years ago, because I mean, it was not easy to do. It was not an easy thing to do. Very courageous thing to do. And I was around it all the time. And so when I found out I was giving birth to a boy, I said, I'm not bringing another straight white male onto this planet. I've had enough of those. And so I call it Cher therapy, and that's probably rude, but the singer Cher, we listened to Cher, I mean, every stereotypical thing you could do. My pregnancy was entirely engaged in making sure that if it was possible to have a gay son, I would do it. And we spent his childhood, he got to wear whatever he wanted. We put no gender boundaries on him. We absolutely said, you be you. Be awesome if you're gay, but we'll accept you if you're straight. And I honestly thought that every parent on the planet thought the way I did. It never occurred to me until I got into elementary school that we still had people who didn't want their kids to be gay. Like, I would joke about my son having a crush on their son, and their faces changed. And I was like, it is 2014, y'all. How is this still happening? And so it's funny because I haven't, you know, ironically, it turns out my son appears to be straight, and I gave up the fight. And I have accepted that I have inflicted another straight white male on the American population, and I'm apologizing. I tried, people. I tried. But it turns out there's nothing you can do about that. You cannot force the gay, you cannot force the straight. I tried. It doesn't work. And I showed up in elementary school with parents who were like, we can't even talk about the gay because if we have this in our sex ed classes, then our children will be gay and we can't have that. And I'm like, oh my. So it was so it's funny because I don't think about it much anymore, but it was one of the things that got me thinking, you know, beyond my own child, that as a society, we have a responsibility to inflict less toxic masculinity, which I associate with a lot of straight white males right now. And I have my entire life. And so my impetus was showing up in this elementary school and realizing we had not progressed past 1978 in some extremely meaningful ways. Then I was introduced to standardized testing. Turns out we have changed since 1978 in the worst possible ways. So when I was a kid, the standardized test was something it took an hour out of your entire school year. You never as a kid saw the grades or the results unless your parents felt it was important for you to see them. One time we snuck open our grades just to see, how we'd done. And it was all percentiles. You were compared to everybody in the United States. It was not a test that was normed in your state, looking for losers in your state, like standardized testing here is in Texas. I was horrified to be in a kindergarten classroom with a child who was crying, and I couldn't figure out why. And he said it's because his brother was going to take a test that made him look stupid every year. And he knew his brother was smart. And every year this test made his brother feel stupid. And I was like, what is that? So of course, then I started asking questions. We experienced our first STAR exam where everybody has to be quiet and tiptoe through the hallways as kindergartners. Like, that's abuse to make it a kindergartner be quiet. I'm just saying, as somebody who has spent time with kindergartners, that's not an acceptable expectation for a child to be quiet all day long. I saw the kids, you know, upset. I saw parents in my demographic who were like, my kid's going to take the star. He's going to do great at the star. We need to practice the star. We need to be quiet for the star. Everything's about the star. And I was like, what is this madness that I'm experiencing? And the more I got to know, I even just typed in standardized testing. I didn't even type in what's great about standardized testing, what's bad about, I typed in standardized testing and got a full page of the racist history of standardized testing. Standardized testing is a racist sorting tool. It continues to be a racist sorting tool. It is completely biased. It didn't take long for me to go from this crying child who thinks his brother is stupid because of this test to understanding that this test is designed to make that child feel stupid. And to me, that changed everything. So I started getting involved everywhere I could. I recognized it's not a school issue. Very quickly, I recognized this is not a district issue. This is a state issue. It's a federal issue. I started like signing up, trying to get on committees and be involved in things. And I was not accepted to the Texas Long-Term Education Committee, but because I had been nominated, I got to go to meetings and sort of be involved peripherally in this process. And that's where I started meeting superintendents and there was a superintendent who is just outside of Gerald, or at that time, and this was several years ago. And he said the thing that keeps him up at night is not just that we're continuing to do standardized testing, because superintendents, for the most part, they're focused on the funding, but they get what this does to our children. And our vulnerable children, and the bias against our children, and the fact that it's designed against certain populations. But he said what keeps me up at night is not that we're continuing to do standardized testing, but that it's gone on so long that parents don't even know better. They think this is what education is. That education is about getting this data, remembering enough information to do well on this test that happens once over hours. I mean, that's the other thing. I would never let a babysitter make my child sit for 3 hours or 4 hours at a time for any reason. And at third grade, when my child was 8, he was asked to sit for 4 hours at a time to do standardized tests. I promise you, any answer after 20 minutes was a guess, right? And I saw this over and over with these bright, beautiful children who were trying to make sense of language they didn't understand. And it really hit home when I was doing physical therapy, speech therapy with my son, and they asked us this series of questions that were all popular, pop music, pop culture. And we're full on big time nerds. We spend our time in the garden, we read. I made a point, when my child was in 2nd grade, he asked who Mickey Mouse was. And I was like, I did not give birth to a child to be part of the marketing agenda of these, big corporations like Disney. And so we didn't watch TV and we stayed away from all that. We were answering a test. I was given this test that asked popular culture questions and I didn't know. I felt so dumb. I understood the words. I could read it. I didn't know what this person, if it was an actor or a singer or a movie, like I couldn't respond to these questions. And it isn't that I couldn't read it. It was that it was culturally biased against my lived experiences. And when I experienced that, all of the messages about cultural bias became so stark to me. This is what we were doing to these children. And so it was experiencing all this. It is a constant daily journey, I think, experiencing what is happening in our education system, knowing that it doesn't have to be this way, knowing that these are choices that we've made and choices that were made for us by 40 years of Texas parents not voting. 40 years of Texas parents saying, do what you want. We trust you, or whatever. We're too busy trying to make a living. Whatever it is that's happening in Texas that made people not vote for so very long. We're changing that this time, and that gives me great hope. But you can do anything you want when you're in power and people don't hold you accountable. And to Matthew's point, when I started realizing that this was an accountability system this racist, biased accountability system that was good intentions, you know, like it was trying to make sure that our vulnerable kids were attended to and not being disregarded. It absolutely has not turned out to be an effective measure of that by any stretch, and yet we keep doing it. And it was seeing, it feels like abuse to me when I actually, as I was going through elementary school and learning all this and watching these poor kids suffer, and watching the same kids, you can look at a kid and you know whether they're going to do well in the STAR. You know whether they're in the GT program. That's a whole other thing that was like, how do we still have GT programs? Can I give you an example? As a working person, as a hiring manager, I didn't care what knowledge people came to me with, right? I cared how they handled the knowledge that I needed them to know to do their job. I needed to know that they could handle the information, that they could learn more, that they were willing to, that they could, you know, connect that information to other things that they knew. And that is education, right? That's not, you don't get that from a standardized test. But as a hiring manager, what became very clear to me was that emotional intelligence was what was required to do well in any position that I was ever hiring for. If we gave every child an emotional intelligence test in school, and then those who were high on the emotional intelligence scale, we sent them off into classrooms by themselves and had everybody else in classrooms that didn't include those emotionally intelligent people, those kids, what would be the point of that? Why would we ever do that, right? Would they benefit, the kids who are already at the high end of this emotional intelligence? What would they gain from this? What do we lose by not having those kids incorporated in the regular student population, right? And we don't think about school intelligence that way, bookish intelligence, the kind of intelligence that allows you to remember information and regurgitate it on an exam, right? We don't value that. And yet what we need in the workforce, what we need in the real world, what we need in traffic in Austin, what we need in line at HEB is emotional intelligence. Does it make sense to segregate those people and educate them differently? No, it makes no sense at all. So why, on this level, this type of intelligence that isn't even the most beneficial, why do we do this? So, you know, this has been my journey, is seeing all of these structures that are still in place since the 70s and seeing my own amazing child who is dyslexic, who has his own, you know, learning challenges, but is very bright. He will never pass a STAR. He will never pass the STAR exam. And this is a kid who's been doing chemistry, who's been doing algebra since he was in elementary or kindergarten, just for fun. Like education, learning things is fun for him. He cannot get it down on a test to please the people at the top, right? He can't do that. And we need to stop asking that of our children. We need to stop asking for an education system that is geared toward this whatever warped metrics that we are using right now. It's not okay anymore. And so my story is a combination of all of this, because I was able to get on this, not the committee, but on the list. I was able to go to conferences where I met superintendents, where I met other advocates or educators, and I got invited to the superintendent's conference in March a couple of years ago, just because they happened to have this last meeting at the conference. And while I'm at the conference, we go and they're having this big meeting with Mike Morath. Mike Morath is speaking to the superintendents. There are 4,000 administrators in this room, and they had an open mic. And so after I saw the open mic, I spent 20 or 30 minutes talking myself into going up to that open mic. I didn't have a speech prepared. All I had was righteous indignation and love, deep love for our teachers, and an unwillingness to put up with the abuse anymore. I feel like as adults, we need to provide an umbrella of cover so that our children can thrive. And we're not doing that. Our schools are not doing that. Sorry, Arthly, our district's not doing that. And I am, as a parent, am committed to doing that. So I went and I worked up the courage to go stand in front of this microphone and talk to Mike Morath in front of 4,000 superintendents in associated superintendents. And what I told him is he's in an abusive relationship with our teachers, and our teachers deserve better. I told him that the elephant in the room was standardized testing. And you know what? I got a standing ovation. Like Lisa's experience, afterwards, I had people who were getting selfies with me, superintendents and school administrators getting selfies, asking me where I came from. Who are you? What gave you the courage to stand up and say these things? I had a stack of business cards this big because they're begging. They're dying. They want parents to stand up and take a stand for our children because they can't do it on their own. And it became clear to me after that, I contacted every single superintendent who had given me a card, and every single one of them with about 4 exceptions said, our funding depends on this. Our funding depends on this. Our funding depends on this, right? Unacceptable to me. Unacceptable that funding depends on this. I met this PTA president from upstate New York. And you know what she said to me? We don't raise money in our PTA because we don't need to. What on earth do you guys raise money for? She said they raise enough money to give teacher treats. They don't need more reading specialists. They don't need technology coaches. They don't need to pay for science teachers. They are a fully funded education system, and we are not. And I will never stop speaking out in small ways and big until we are. And it's going to take every single one of us, every parent, everybody who has a child in public education, to vote for people who are willing to fund public education. And I mean, you talk to Just Funded Texas, $44 billion is what we're behind. That's what it would take for us to catch up just to the average, just to the states who are doing an average job of funding education. That means our legislators, our representatives has stolen $44 billion from our children over the last 20 years, whatever it's been. Not okay, not okay anymore. So my story leading up to this is one horrible experience with education and backwards thinking and, you know, a system built around racism after another. And we're going to change this. We're going to change this. I know Arthi is 100% with us. She's ready to change the world as well. But we've got candidates who are running who are also, they're going to do it. They're going to change the world for us. And this is our time to stand up as parents and make sure that everybody we have elected is held accountable for taking care of our babies. Every baby in Texas is precious, and it's our job to take care of all of them. So that is my story. I do thank you guys. And that's why I'm here. And so when Lori called and asked if I could take on this ACPTA role, I was all in, because I am not stopping until we change this. And I know you guys are with me all the way. So we've got a couple other people who I want you to hear from before this is over. I'm gonna call on Cynthia quickly, because I think Cynthia has struggled to get in like other people, and put her on the spotlight. Welcome, Cynthia, and welcome. Thank you for all of you for allowing me to vent for a while. I appreciate it.
You've got a 3-minute elevator speech on why you advocate.
Sorry, Cynthia, I didn't have all your time, my friend.
Yeah, hey y'all, my name's Cynthia Vasquez. I'm a school health equity organizer with GAVA, Go Austin, Vamos Austin. I'm also a 78702 East Austin native, public school outcome, public school product. I have 3 boys. I had my first one, I was 16, so he's getting ready to graduate from UT in El Paso. My second one is 19, somewhere off in the world doing his thing. I have no idea. And then I have a little 5-year-old, and he's currently in kindergarten at Palm Elementary. So I'm probably, like most of you, wearing 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hats. And I'll just get straight to the point. I learned how to advocate, or I learned about the importance of advocacy because somebody took me along, and it was my mom. I started attending meetings with my mom about, honestly, we were trying to figure out why our kids were joining gangs. Well, I wasn't, right? My mom was wondering, and so were a lot of other moms. Were sitting around wondering where their boys were going after school. Where are our kids hanging out after school? And so that conversation grew into the first after-school programming in the United States. And that came straight out of 78702 because of advocacy and organizing. And my mom took me to those meetings. For whatever reason, I sat in the back, right? And we oftentimes find excuses for somebody. Maybe that person's too tired. Maybe my kids can't handle it. Maybe this, maybe that. Those are all assumptions and barriers and internalized oppression that can keep us from giving people the opportunity. And that's one of the biggest barriers right now that I'm finding in advocacy, is not even affording people the opportunity to advocate because of our assumptions. So my mom dragged me, I use the word drag because I was 10 at that time. She dragged me to these meetings, but these meetings were about building public relationships. So I'm sitting in the back chilling, right, doing my 10-year-old thing, but there's grown adults who don't have a partner, and they've been matched up to start this technique of individual meetings, relational meetings. So they pull the 10-year-old out from the back and say, hey, if this adult doesn't have a partner, come join. And I'm sitting there like, what? What are we doing? And they're all really encouraging people, right? So they just, come have a seat, little one, come sit down. And that's how I learned how to have conversations with people, y'all. 10 years old. Like, I didn't realize what was happening. I didn't know the power and the transformation that was happening with my mom attending these meetings. And then her asking maybe the PTA, some other PTA members to go. But that all had to do with leadership. Her principal made her the PTA president at Zavala Elementary, I think in 1994. And it was his leadership that really encouraged her to advocate. And he just took her with him. He went to principal meetings and he was showing up with a parent, y'all. Like, this principal was walking into principal only conversations with my mom. So that's what I mean. Like, it's about who's coming with you. Advocacy is about who are you taking with you. Because some of us, I think all of us in here, we know the power we have. We know we can bring people together. We know how to do that. But who else is learning through that? And I'll close out with one of my mentors. He dropped a pearl of wisdom on me last week. And he says, Cynthia, in your debriefing and your critical feedback, which I'm also working on, giving and receiving critical feedback through this process, is, I don't want to dip y'all. I don't want to short y'all of this knowledge, but one of our questions right now in advocacy is, what did you learn through this process that helped strengthen your community work? And I thought that was such a moving question and can be adapted to any kind of work that you lead, and in the development of any leader or person who is working up to leadership could really use to analyze that developmental piece that is sometimes lacking in the advocacy work.
Love it.
And I've seen some parents already tapping into each other. Hey, do you want to go to this meeting with me? Hey, I'm kind of uncomfortable about entering this meeting. Do you want to come with me? That's the beginning. So who are we taking with us? Thanks, y'all.
Love it, Cynthia. Hey, will you repeat that question one more time, Cynthia?
Yeah, let me show y'all my cheat board.
Yeah.
So I have 3 mentors right now. And this one is Ron Chisholm, and I talk to him late at night, and he helps me on leadership development. So what did you learn that helped strengthen your community work? So what did you learn through this process? And it's helped me in areas where, man, y'all, I'm challenged by Black leadership right now, and getting comfortable in those spaces, right? And just challenging leadership altogether. And he's like, well, bring it back to the community. What are they doing that's helped? Because we're all talking about breaks and that compassion fatigue, right? So when we step back from the work, who can do what we did? Or who has an idea of how to keep the work going? And so that question really forces us to think of, how are we keeping community involved in these conversations and in this process?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Cynthia. And I do want to point out to everybody that a common thread here is that many of us were exposed to community involvement in one way or another through our parents. And I know I hear this all the time and I think about it all the time. My parents, we didn't join the swim team. Like, we didn't just like go to join the swim team. My parents became president of the swim team. We weren't just like in the Girl Scouts. My mom was the leader. You know what I mean? Like, that was what I thought. I thought when I started elementary school that it was my obligation to be engaged in this community. And it was why when I was PTA president, it was my main focus was to make sure there were children, lots of children at our PTA meetings, because I want children to think that's where I belong. I belong where policies are happening, where you know, decisions are being made. So thank you so much. You know what? I would love to keep this going. I see Jolisa and Lori and you know, Emily. I would love to hear your stories. Alas, we must end. I must respect our Facebook Live limits. But I love you all. Let's go change the world. Go take this energy from this meeting and go talk to everybody you can possibly talk to. And let's see what we can do to be a tidal wave of change for our state and for public education this legislative session. Thank you guys so much.
Can everyone unmute and say goodbye and
Go vote! Go vote! Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Remember,
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks, John.
Adios.
love you guys. Take care.
Great job, Daphne. Way to pull that together, kid.